She was my neighbor's wife, but the night she looked into my eyes and whispered, "I'm not waiting for him, I'm waiting for you," everything I thought I knew began to change. It started on one of those evenings when the air carries just the right balance of warmth and breeze. The kind of evening where people linger on their porches a little longer, and shadows stretch across the neighborhood like gentle reminders that the day is quietly folding into night. I had just come back from a long day, keys jangling in my hand as I walked up the narrow path to my front door. That's when I saw her. She was standing on her porch across the fence, holding a small potted plant as if she were deciding whether to bring it inside or leave it to catch the last of the light. I'd seen her before, of course. She was the woman next door, my neighbor's wife. Always graceful, always carrying herself with a kind of confidence that turned heads, yet she never seemed to invite attention. But that evening felt different. For the first time, I noticed something beyond appearances. She looked up, and our eyes met. There wasn't anything dramatic about it, no sudden rush, no lingering stare, but there was a warmth in her smile, the kind of warmth that made you feel like she wasn't just smiling at you, but into you. "Evening," she said, her voice calm, steady, carrying that softness that lingers after it's spoken. I nodded, returning the greeting. "Evening. Looks like your plant's enjoying the sun." A small laugh slipped from her, quiet and genuine. "I think it's surviving despite me." The sound of her laugh stayed with me longer than I expected. She shifted the pot in her hands, and a few strands of hair fell loose across her cheek. She tucked them back behind her ear in a motion so simple, yet it carried a grace that caught me off guard. I leaned against the railing of my steps without thinking, just to keep the conversation going a little longer. She asked if I had lived here long, and I admitted I was still finding my rhythm in this neighborhood. Her eyes lit with something, kindness, maybe curiosity. The air between us wasn't charged, not yet. It was comfortable. Like the ease of meeting someone who already speaks your language without words. Her husband's car pulled into the driveway then, and she glanced back, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been watching so closely. She waved to me once more, a small, almost reluctant gesture, before disappearing inside. As I unlocked my door and stepped into my own quiet house, I felt something stir that I couldn't quite name. Not attraction exactly, not yet. More like an awareness, a sudden noticing of someone I had overlooked until now. And as the night drew in, the memory of her smile, gentle, lingering, and just a little too warm to be casual, remained with me long after the porch lights went dark. The next time we spoke, it wasn't out on the porch or across the fence. It was inside her home. I had just gotten back from running errands when I heard her voice calling my name. She was standing in her driveway, one arm balancing a bag of groceries that looked far too heavy for her to carry alone. Without a second thought, I walked over. "Need a hand?" I asked. Relief softened her face. "I'd appreciate it." "Thank you." The bags were heavier than they looked, filled with bottles and vegetables. I carried them into her kitchen, a place I had never been before. The moment I stepped in, I noticed how warm it felt, not from temperature, but from the way everything seemed cared for. A vase of fresh flowers on the table. A soft, woven cloth draped neatly across the counter. The faint smell of coffee lingered in the air, grounding the silence. She busied herself unpacking the groceries, moving gracefully, but I could sense a restlessness beneath her movements. She spoke lightly about the neighborhood, the weather, even the store being crowded, but her eyes kept flicking toward the window as if she expected someone to walk through the door at any moment. When she mentioned her husband, it was casual, but I heard something in her tone, something thin, almost brittle. "He's been away a lot for work," she said, her hands lingering a second too long on a jar before setting it down. "Keeps him busy, I suppose." I nodded, unsure if I should respond. I could feel the weight of her words, even though she disguised them as nothing. The silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward, it was heavy, like a truth hovering just above us, waiting for permission to fall. Trying to ease it, I smiled faintly and said, at least the plant's surviving. You must be doing something right. That earned a laugh, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the same way she had the first evening, but her hand trembled slightly as if she didn't want me to notice. And I realized then, it wasn't just the groceries she had needed help with. I stood there, unsure what to do, feeling the pulse of something fragile between us. I wanted to reach across the counter, place my hand over hers, tell her she wasn't invisible. But I held back. Instead, I picked up one of the bags still sitting by my feet and asked where she wanted it. "Over there," she said softly, pointing toward the cupboard. Her voice had steadied, but the quiet in her eyes remained. When I finally left her house, the evening air felt cooler against my skin. My own place felt emptier than usual. And though nothing had been spoken outright, I couldn't shake the sense that her loneliness had reached across that kitchen and touched me in a way I wasn't prepared for. The third time we crossed paths, it wasn't planned. It never was. That was part of the reason it felt so natural, like something was quietly arranging our meetings before either of us knew it. It was late in the afternoon, the kind of day where the air smelled faintly of rain even though the sky hadn't yet broken. I was walking back from the corner store when I saw her again. She was coming up the street, her hair pinned loosely, carrying a small bag of fruit in her hand. We stopped at the same moment, almost laughing at the coincidence. "You again," she teased softly, her voice carrying a warmth that felt too deliberate to be casual. "Guess we're on the same schedule," I replied. We walked the last stretch together, the easy rhythm of our steps falling in sync. Her stories were light, something about the vendor at the market, the oranges being too expensive, but underneath, her laughter sounded softer than usual, more vulnerable, as though she wasn't just talking to pass the time. She was sharing herself in pieces, gently, cautiously. By the time we reached her gate, the first drops of rain began to fall. She looked up at the sky, then at me. "You'll get soaked going back like this," she said. I shrugged, though my shirt already carried tiny dark spots. "Wouldn't be the first time." She hesitated for a moment, then pushed open her door. "Come inside. Just until it slows down." Her living room felt different in the dim light of a storm gathering outside. The curtains moved faintly with the breeze through a cracked window, carrying the cool, damp scent of rain. She set the bag of fruit down and gestured toward the couch. I sat, trying not to feel out of place. She joined me a moment later, a comfortable distance at first, though not nearly as wide as it could have been. The couch dipped slightly under her weight, and for a second, I was acutely aware of how close we were. The rain came heavier then, filling the silence with its steady rhythm. We talked, about books she had on her shelf, about how she once wanted to travel but never did, about small things that somehow carried weight simply because she was sharing them with me. Her laughter slipped through the sound of the rain, and in that moment, I noticed her hand resting lightly on the armrest, just inches from mine. Close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of her skin. I didn't move, but the awareness of that nearness changed the air between us. It wasn't just neighborly anymore. It was something delicate, something neither of us dared name. When the storm finally eased, I stood reluctantly, murmuring that I should head back. She walked me to the door, her shoulder brushing lightly against mine as we stood there for a second too long. Her eyes lingered, and though she said nothing, I carried the weight of that silence with me all the way home. It was one of those evenings when the day had already surrendered, but the night hadn't yet claimed its silence. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet where even a passing car feels like an interruption. She had called me earlier, her voice hesitant, asking if I could come by to help with something small, a light bulb, she said, in the hallway that had gone out. When I arrived, the house felt dimmer than usual, shadows stretching across the walls. I replaced the bulb quickly, hardly more than a few minutes' work, but she lingered in the doorway, watching me, as though she wasn't ready for me to leave just yet. "Do you have time for tea?" she asked softly. Her tone wasn't casual. It carried a weight, as though she was asking for more than company. I nodded, and soon we were sitting at the kitchen table, steam curling up from the cups between us. The only sounds were the faint tick of a clock on the wall and the whisper of rain tapping against the windows. She looked tired, though not in a way sleep could fix. There was something in her eyes, an ache, quiet and restrained, that seemed older than the lines at the corners of her smile. For a while we spoke about little things, the neighborhood, the weather, but the words seemed hollow, as if they were a thin curtain she was struggling to keep drawn. Then she fell silent, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Finally, she said, almost to herself, "Do you ever feel invisible in your own home?" The question caught me off guard. I didn't answer right away, and she didn't look up. Instead, she stared into her tea, her voice dropping lower. "He's a good man, in his way. But sometimes I wonder if he even sees me anymore. If I stopped moving, if I stopped trying, would he even notice?" Her words hung between us like fragile glass, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to catch them or let them fall. I leaned forward, my voice careful, almost a whisper. "I notice." She lifted her eyes then, and the look she gave me was unlike any I'd seen from her before, unguarded, searching. The kind of look that strips away everything polite and practiced, leaving only truth. Without thinking, I reached across the table, placing my hand gently over hers. Her fingers twitched beneath mine, then stilled, and in that stillness, I felt something pass between us, something heavier than words, yet tender. Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell. She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into the touch, her breathing uneven, as though she had been holding herself together for too long. Neither of us said another word. We didn't need to. The silence itself became the confession, carrying more honesty than speech could bear. And when I finally left that night, the warmth of her hand still lingered in mine, a quiet echo I couldn't shake. After that night at her kitchen table, something unspoken began to live between us. It wasn't declared, it wasn't even acknowledged, but it hovered in every glance, every pause, every step that brought us near. The next few days, I found myself crossing paths with her more often, sometimes by chance, sometimes because I almost willed it. A walk down the street, a trip to the mailbox, a wave from across the yard. And each time, her smile held something deeper than before, as if we shared a secret that neither of us dared to put into words. One evening, she called me over again, nothing urgent, just a jar on the top shelf of her cupboard she couldn't quite reach. It was a simple excuse, and I think we both knew it. I fetched it easily, setting it down on the counter. She thanked me with a smile that lingered, her hand brushing my shoulder lightly as she passed by. That single touch, so brief, so innocent, sent a rush of heat through me stronger than I cared to admit. We ended up in the living room afterward, talking over tea. The lamp cast a soft golden glow, turning the space into something that felt removed from the world outside. She sat across from me at first, but little by little, the distance shortened, her chair angled slightly toward mine, her knee brushing against my leg when she shifted. Neither of us moved away. I caught her watching me once when I wasn't speaking. Her eyes held mine longer than politeness would allow, and in that silence, everything unsaid seemed to roar between us. I felt my breath catch, as though if I leaned in even slightly, the air itself would close the gap. But I didn't. Neither of us did. We lingered in that delicate space, just on the edge of something neither of us was ready to name. When I passed her the sugar bowl, my fingers grazed hers, light, accidental, but undeniably charged. She didn't flinch. Instead, her hand stilled beneath mine for half a heartbeat before she withdrew, her lips parting slightly as if to speak, though no words came. Time seemed to stretch in those moments. Every laugh, every glance, every brush of her hand against mine felt magnified, as though the universe itself was conspiring to hold us there, suspended between what we were and what we were not yet. When I finally rose to leave, the air between us was heavy with restraint. She walked me to the door, her shoulder brushing mine again, her perfume faint and familiar. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob, searching for something, anything, that could ease the ache of leaving. She smiled, quiet and knowing, and whispered, "Good night." It was nothing more than that. But as I stepped out into the night, my heart raced with everything her voice had left unsaid. The evening it happened, I hadn't expected to see her. I'd been out walking, restless, the kind of restlessness that has no clear reason but won't let you sit still. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowing like watchful eyes, when I noticed her front door slightly open. A thin line of light spilled across the steps. She appeared before I could call her name, leaning gently against the frame. Her hair was down, loose and natural, falling across her shoulders. She gave me a tired smile, one that seemed to say, "I wasn't expecting anyone, but I'm glad it's you." "Out for a walk?" she asked softly. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. She hesitated, then pushed the door wider. "Come in. I'll make tea." Inside, the house was quiet, quieter than usual. A single lamp glowed in the living room, casting long, gentle shadows across the walls. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if she were weighing every step, every action. We sat together on the couch, mugs warming our hands, speaking about nothing and everything all at once. But the pauses said more than the words. They were heavy, trembling, full of things neither of us dared put into sentences. At some point, the conversation trailed off completely. The rain had started again outside, soft against the windows, and the silence between us became unbearable. I set my mug down, my heart pounding harder than it should have. She was sitting so close that I could see the rise and fall of her breath, the delicate line of her collarbone, the way her fingers gripped the porcelain cup a little too tightly. When I shifted slightly, our knees brushed. Neither of us moved. The air grew thick with the weight of it, until finally, she set her cup aside and turned toward me. Her hand came up, hesitating for a moment before pressing gently against my chest. I felt her palm over my heartbeat, unsteady, racing, giving me away. Her voice was quiet, trembling but firm enough to carry the truth, "I'm not waiting for him. I'm waiting for you." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to fall silent around those words, leaving only the sound of her breath, the touch of her hand, the fierce certainty in her eyes. I searched her face, half expecting doubt, regret, something to soften the weight of what she had just said. But there was none. Only honesty. Only longing. My hand covered hers, holding it against my chest. I didn't lean in, didn't rush forward. I just let the moment exist, let it be exactly what it was. Because for the first time, everything unspoken between us had been given voice. And nothing could ever be the same again. The silence after her confession felt endless, yet not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that carries truth, heavy, undeniable, and alive with everything words could never quite hold. Her hand was still pressed to my chest, and mine rested over it, keeping it there as though I couldn't let go even if I wanted to. I don't know how long we sat like that, but eventually, her shoulders relaxed, as if she had released something she had been carrying for years. The faintest quiver left her lips, and when she exhaled, it sounded like relief. I leaned closer, not in a rush, but carefully, like approaching something fragile and sacred. She didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw her not as the woman next door, not as someone else's wife, but as a soul who longed to be seen, to be held. My arms went around her slowly, almost asking permission. When she let herself fold into me, the moment felt timeless. Her cheek rested against my shoulder, her hair brushing softly against my jaw. I could feel the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat aligning with mine, a rhythm that grounded us both. She whispered, almost to herself, "I don't remember the last time I felt this, safe." I held her tighter, not needing to answer. The warmth of her body against mine was answer enough. There was no urgency, no desperation, just the comfort of finally belonging, of finally being known. Outside, the rain had quieted, leaving behind the hush of dripping branches and damp earth. The whole world seemed softer, as if it, too, had surrendered to the calm. When she finally lifted her head, her face was only inches from mine. Her hand brushed lightly against my cheek, fingertips lingering as though memorizing the shape of me. There was no kiss, no hurried crossing of lines, just the intimacy of closeness, of two people finally standing in the truth of what they felt. "I don't know where this leads," she admitted, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. "But I know what I want. And it's here. With you." I nodded, unable to find words that could match the gravity of hers. So I didn't try. Instead, I placed my forehead gently against hers, closing my eyes and breathing her in. In that moment, everything else, expectations, doubts, the weight of what tomorrow might bring, faded away. All that remained was the quiet certainty that whatever this was, it was real. We stayed there, wrapped in each other's presence, as the night deepened around us. No grand declarations, no promises carved in stone. Just two hearts finally meeting in the space they had been reaching for all along. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more slow burn age gap romance stories. Your support helps me keep bringing these heartfelt moments to life. And if you'd like to continue this journey with me, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.